after PHP World, our next event is not a technical event. It's actually a gaming con in Frederick, Maryland. It's in March. It's also, unfortunately, this year the same weekend as our local convention, Mid-South Con. After that, our next event is PHP Tech in May. So we're going to do things, from what I understand, a little bit differently this year. There's not going to be an open CFP. If that changes, I will let you guys know. But we will probably have tickets available for that event around the first of the year, opening up. After that, we have Coder Cruise. If you have not already looked at Coder Cruise, it's something you should check out. It's a polyglot conference on a cruise ship. There are several people in this room who have spoken at Coder Cruise. Jason has spoken, Joe has spoken twice, I spoke this year. It is a great, great event. The people in this room that know me know that I volunteered for One for All events for several years before they actually hired me. So I was pretty enthusiastic about their events before I went to work for them, so I'm not just up here telling you how great they are because they give me a paycheck now. So they do 2 PHP conferences, PHP Tech and PHP World, 2 polyglot conferences, Mid-Atlantic DevCon and Coder Cruise, and BFG Con. So if you have any questions about any of those events, if you want to talk to me about being a speaker or a volunteer or anything like that, you can see me after the panel tonight because they want to get started. So thank you.
So, Mike, you want to jump up and talk about getting technical?
I'll be even faster.
What's good, man?
What's
So,
up?
February 22nd through 24th, we have our annual charity hackathon coming up, Give Camp Memphis. Participated before, share your experiences.
It's awesome. It's a lot of fun. It
It's
really
awesome.
is.
It's a lot of fun. It's doing projects for charities that can't afford it or don't know how to do these things, and we get it done in a week. It's awesome. It's free to sign up for. We'll be all weekend. It'll be fun stuff to work on. GiveCampMemphis.org. Cool. Well, yeah,
And there's stickers.
oh, yes.
And there's stickers.
Who doesn't want stickers?
So,
Was that Give Camp or Get Camp?
Give Camp.
Give.
Let's get camp for the charity. So, welcome to DevMemphis. I think this is our 3rd meeting, and I just found out we got to cut it off at 7 because there's actually another meetup in here. Maybe we can negotiate with them. But tonight was kind of Joe's idea. This is going to be kind of a panel discussion about being a professional developer. So we've got some awesome people here. Joe, Josh, Jason, and Kevin. I don't know names. Anyway, they'll tell you about themselves. All these guys are great developers and know a lot about the industry and the craft and that kind of thing. So this should be pretty cool. So yeah, I'll let Joe run the show from here. Thanks for coming.
My name is Joe. If y'all don't know who I am, I used to run the Memphis PHP user group until I gave it up. I still do PHP because PHP is the superior language, but I just don't run the user group anymore. I've been a professional developer since 2005. I've been a hobbyist developer since sometime in 1998, 1999. So I've been doing this a little while, and one of the things that I see in Memphis is this push and this drive to get people who want to change careers, regardless of their economic status, regardless of anything that they've had come up in their life that's either helpful or hindering their education, work experience, whatever, to get those people into development and get them into into a different career path or even a career path. So I figured this would be a really great panel. I really kind of secretly wanted to do this panel because I want to hear what some of these other guys are going to say, because we have Josh, who works for Heroku. I'll let him introduce himself here in a second. Kevin, who works for Oopla. Jason, who is working for say that again? Hodia. So I've kind of followed these guys for I guess as long as I've known you guys in MemTech. You've always been fellow developers that I've looked up to and kind of tried to be like you guys. So this panel was a lot for me as well as for other people to be able to kind of talk through some of the stuff that I go through, some of the stuff that I have to deal with on a daily basis as a professional developer, and see how these guys, how they stack up and how their experiences compare and contrast. And I'd like to challenge the DevMemphis user group as a whole. In a few months, maybe in 6 months or maybe in 3 months, let's do this again with a different set of professional developers up here. And try to get more feedback and try to get more of this conversation happening in Memphis and sharing this knowledge, because nothing I know costs any money. There's nothing that I know that none of y'all can't learn. There's no barrier for any one of you to be a professional developer like me, like Josh, or anybody in this room if you're already a professional developer. Who here is a professional developer today? Okay. And who here wants to be a developer? Okay. This is the that's why I love you, George. One of these days I'm also going to be a professional developer just like Georgia. So yeah, that's kind of what this is here for. Audience participation is definitely going to be suggested, encouraged. We want to hear your questions. As you can see, I don't have any slides. I don't have my computer open. This isn't anything that I've prepared. This is hopefully going to be a very ad hoc and natural conversation. So yeah, I'll let Josh come up and introduce himself, and then we can get Jason and Kevin as well.
Why don't y'all all go sit down?
Or we just all go sit down. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm happy to do it. Makes me less
Cool.
yeah, sure. Wherever, doesn't matter. So I guess since Kevin decided to sit next to me, we're starting with Kevin and not Josh.
I'm Kevin Nuckolls. I work at Nuckolls. They paid for the pizza today. They wanted me to plug Nuckolls, so.
Yeah, woo.
It was a tasty.
I will. And Nuckolls Mosaic bought out, Nuckolls bought out Mosaic over the summer. So there's been this sort of long-ish sort of integration period where I went from being the director of software engineering over there. And I worked there years ago as well, but now I'm a lowly software architect. So I've moved back from management into starting to write code on a daily basis again and getting my sea legs back. So done a lot of other stuff too. We can talk about it.
My name is Jason. I kind of stumbled into programming. I started front-end development and then got kind of upset that I couldn't do anything with data. So I became a backend developer, and now I'm a full-stack developer, I guess. And I've been doing it professionally since 2013.
Josh Lewis. My history is I'm a former mechanical engineer and got tired of working in a factory and started programming. Eventually became a startup, and then it eventually became a full-time career. So now I work at Roku, building software for software developers. So if you guys, as you move along in your career, you'll probably use Roku at some point. Anyway, that's what I work on. Mostly Ruby, JavaScript, some Go, stuff like that.
Yeah, let's run through real quick just to say, just rattle off primary languages and technologies. I'm PHP, MySQL, Linux, LambStack, full stack developer-ish.
I did a lot of stuff. The last couple of years I've written a lot of Go. I wrote Ruby for many years. I've written some nasty SQL. And then Linux and databases and tuning and orchestration, Chef and Kubernetes and all that stuff.
I mostly just do Ruby and JavaScript.
Yeah, so Ruby, JavaScript, Go every now and then, Elixir, or actually quite a bit of Bash, SQL.
Bash is the real glue
You'd
of
be amazed.
everything.
We have so much Bash.
That doesn't surprise me, it is great.
So, are there any initial questions? I have things somewhat prepared to where I have conversation starters and direction. But are there any initial questions that anybody's brave enough to start us off with? Yeah.
You said you were hobby developer type thing. That you said 2005. How'd you make the transition to actually turning that into a job?
I worked in retail management for several years, too long, which I mean, a month in retail management is too long. I managed to successfully con a company in Collierville into the idea that I knew how to turn a PSD into HTML, which wasn't a total lie. I knew how it was done, just not well. So for about 2 months, they had me doing, I was cutting up PSDs into implementing front-end designs, and they realized how terrible I was at it, but I had this really good knack of solving all of the hosting problems and all of the Perl problems that we had with the shopping cart that we used at the time. And I just kind of transitioned away from doing their front end and went on to build entire back-end infrastructure for this company, an order management system across hundreds of sites. And this was all Magento, what's the Rails-based e-commerce? That's Spree. Yeah, this is pre a lot of those packages. CGI, Common Gateway Interface, was the prevalent technology there, where you had a CGI bin and you threw parameters there and it executed code on the backend server, and not nearly as
Secure.
robust or secure as it is these days. But I started out with Perl and quickly moved on to PHP. It's really, there was this turning point in my career that I went down, and it was like a fork in the road where I could have gone Python, I could have gone PHP, and obviously I ultimately went PHP just because that's what I found, that was the syntax that I preferred over Python. But you know, when I see Brad Montgomery, who's a very prominent Python developer in Memphis, who isn't here tonight, but when I look at Brad, I could very easily see myself being in his career path, because there's just that one little fork in the road was all it was for me, and I ventured into the PHP side, and will never live it down.
You're PHP famous.
I am somewhat PHP famous. Any of you guys want to cover how you got into a tech job? How did you make the mechanical engineer jump?
So yeah, I was working in a factory. Everybody made $8 an hour, worked in an unair conditioned shop, and my job was to optimize workflows in the shop. You know, not too much whip, trying to change how they work and make it more efficient. And they didn't want to hear anything from me. I was 20, 25. You know, they're disgruntled, unair conditioned employees. So like, I knew enough code that I could like write VB script and like, instead of somebody copying, like printing out an Excel spreadsheet and then taking the computational output from that, typing it in the next thing, and then somebody else would print that out, and then they take it out to the floor, and somebody else would type it again, and you know, just like it started out just automating a lot of that stuff because I just knew barely enough Visual Basic. I don't know, so I gained a bunch of confidence there, and then eventually I found a customer of ours who would like call me and say, hey, I need this coil. I have no idea. I built coils, HVAC coils. So they had no idea anything about the product. So I'd like open our software that we gave him, just fill out everything that he basically didn't want to fill in, and then give him a quote. He'd fax it to his customer, mark it up, then he'd fax it, he'd get a fax back, he'd fax it to me, and then we put the order in. So it was all this like very rudimentary stuff, and this guy was like making millions each month on just like basically faxing it to somebody in the office, faxing it to his customer, you know, just like this. Anyway, so I decided I could, with the confidence, I could build an app that could do that. And at the time, Rails was really popular. It was kind of like coming of age of Rails, and everybody could be a startup entrepreneur. So I gave it a shot and ran it on the side. I even had like a little computer under my desk trying to like code at work, trying to usurp my current job. Anyway, I had like this other name for myself. It was Jake Reynolds, and one day I answered the phone with the wrong name because I was trying to be like this covert, like working 2 jobs. And then I'm like, man, this is just crazy. I shouldn't be doing this. And I just quit that job and then like found because at that point I knew enough about Rails, and there were just Rails jobs kind of just everywhere at the time. So yeah, I was basically in a good enough state to where I could fake professional developer. And you know, I basically changed my resume just to delete the mechanical part out of all the engineering positions. And then, you know, it was enough to fake it into.
So I have a couple questions for you guys. So how many mentor young people or even older people that want to get back into development or anything like that? Do you guys have a mentoring type program or anything like that, or?
I I don't know, like, I don't think officially, like, I've offered to mentor people, and then I meet with them a couple of times, they disappear. So,
That's because you write Ruby.
that's fine. I'm okay with that.
The other question I have is, what is the path now? I mean, like you said, Ruby was it back in the day. How do you know which path to go on and which is gonna be the most, depends on what you want out of it. Obviously, everyone wants money, so.
You ask your
Yeah,
VC, right?
I got a couple of thoughts, I guess, right, which is that, in general, the core thing that I do is I Google a whole lot. Like, honest to God, I Google it. I will have 200 tabs open by the time I get some code done.
We all do. This is not a unique to
This is
Kevin
not
thing.
unique,
Yeah.
right? Like, this
Yeah.
is, some of this code in these languages I've used, right? Some of them I haven't, but guaranteed somebody has done it or something close to it. So I think really honestly, when you talk about mentoring, that the first step along the way is gonna be hit Control-T to open a new tab and ask a question and read real fast and,
I don't know, I'm learning Python right now,
You
so.
know what I mean? But the other bit of your question was, how do you know what's the thing, right?
Yeah.
So a couple of you have heard me say this before, but every couple of years, and it used to be more often than that, I would go to Indeed.com, which is a job aggregator. I would put in software engineer, but I wouldn't put in a city. And then I would put the money slider all the way to the top, right? And then I wrote down every word I didn't know. And then I put in every word I didn't know, and I wrote down every word I didn't know. And then what you have effectively is a list of the technologies that people are willing to pay for people that know them. So the only real trick is to figure out why. Like, what does that tool do? What is that word, right? So then you effectively have a small lexicon. It kind of gets bigger over time, but of what people are willing to pay for in 2018 or 19 or whatever, right? So anybody can do that. It takes an afternoon, really. So I do it casually every once in a while to see if there's any new words I don't know about. It's good to know the words, I guess, right? But I think that's really honestly one of the hardest parts is there's at this point 30, 40 years of different layers of abstraction, and that like each one of these tools was somebody hated that tool so much that they made a new one, right? Like, and then each one of those tools, some of them last, some of them don't. But there's this whole lineage of the way that each one of those tools that would show up in that search sort of got there from the ones and zeros age, right? So I think that's the real art of it.
You said 30 or 40 years. That's only 30 or 40 years. If you want to go be a marine biologist, you have hundreds of years of human knowledge to build on. But we haven't really been using computers that long. So aside from math, you can go pretty deep down the rabbit hole pretty quickly in computing.
For sure.
If you want to learn, because you can get back through that 30 or 40 years pretty thoroughly if you study on it. That's how I look at it. Like, a lot of domains go back hundreds, thousands of years of human knowledge, but here we have something that's relatively new in the domain of.
I would argue though that it changes a great deal. It changes constantly, right? Like, so I'm somewhat worried that will my skill sets be obsolete someday? Maybe they will. I can still talk to people, right? I think it'll be fine, but I don't know.
Like, there's not too many need for a COBOL programmer.
Well, at least until they decide to rewrite the
Well, I
COBOL.
was gonna say,
and all
which is
that.
what I
Like,
did.
COBOL programmers,
They might.
retire, and then there's that
Yeah.
like golden age of consulting and COBOL.
Yeah.
COBOL programmers are still necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as what path
I want
to
to make a
pay.
comment though before we move on about mentorship, because I kind of consider everyone at this table to be a mentor to me in some way or another. But I've never spoken about that with any of you or like discussed formal mentorship or anything. For me, it's a two-way relationship. So, the person, the mentee, so to speak, also has to come to the table. And in my case, I've encountered these folks through these meetups and user groups. And so over the years, I'll come to a user group and I'll see Joe give a talk, or I've been to conferences with Josh and Jason and Joe actually, and I see these people over and over again, and I hear about what they talk about, and I write things down, kind of like Kevin said, words to Google later. And then the next time I see them, I've Googled that thing, I know more about it, I can ask questions, and I can have conversations. And that's how I've learned, through being around other people. I think that's really important. That's a really important part of being a developer is it doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have to be around other people. You have to follow other people. You have to know what people are talking about, whether it's through user groups or conferences or Hacker News or Twitter or whatever. There's people out here writing software every day, and it's a really open and friendly industry. So, you know, you kind of can't go wrong just getting around people and following people every way you can. And then, you know, the path to mentorship, in my opinion, is sort of letting people know that you care about what they have to say and that you're interested in what they're interested in. And then it just kind of happens naturally instead of this sort of like formal engagement where there's obligations on either part. That's sort of my experience with it. I feel like that's helped me a whole lot.
So I'm the opposite. I wouldn't follow anybody around, like, because I'm introverted. I'm like, not really. I mean, I do okay at this because I can talk about tangible things that I know about, but
So
generally, as a noob, I was always like on Twitter, following like common people who were like well known in that community, and like hanging off every word they said. And it was kind of like, you know, sad, really. But I learned a whole.
That's what I did.
I still do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
I just eavesdropped on people in Silicon Valley talking to each other. God knows what about,
Nope.
but I Googled all those words. Right?
Yeah.
The important thing when it comes to mentorship, sorry, I'm not trying to cut anybody off, but knowing how you learn is really important. Like, I learn really well by reading the docs and then going and breaking something. And that's my process. I don't learn very well by watching a video and then following along, or I don't learn well by reading a document that is a tutorial and working through the tutorial, because halfway through the instructions of the tutorial, I'm already 5 steps ahead and have half of the application on fire, and something managed to work over here, but I have no idea how. So I'm a tinkerer. I like to break things and understand how they work, and once I understand something at the very basic level, how it works, I'm good all the way back up to the top of the stack. And everybody that is going to be a developer, that is a developer, needs to know how they learn. Because if you ever stop learning as a developer, I hope you can still talk to people. Like Kevin said, you know, when all of your skills are obsolete, you can still talk to people, so hopefully you can do something.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you go back to school.
Yeah.
I think that our field is not anywhere near as hierarchical as most other endeavors. The line between mentor and mentee is very, very murky, and everybody has something to bring to the table. But you have to approach it with that open mind. You realize, oh, I'm not coming up the mountain to receive the word from God, because no, everybody has something to bring here. If it's just a new problem, that is also something to bring. And quite often that's the biggest thing to bring, because we've got all sorts of tool sets that we don't necessarily know what the best use is for, but we're all sitting around here waiting for good use cases.
It goes to saying, don't ever be an expert, always be a student. As long as you come to the table like that.
Don't always be the
there's
smartest
nobody
person in the
who
room
can
unless you're
just-
intentionally there to share, is how I like to repeat that saying of don't be the smartest person in the room. In my current day job, I am one of the smartest people in the room, but I am a team leader. I run a dev team. Where I learn during my day job is from our ops team, because I'm all about servers and infrastructure. I want to learn how to properly min-max all of that stuff to squeeze out every last bit of performance I can. So I'm leaning on my ops team to teach me stuff that I'm unfamiliar with, while I am in turn teaching my direct report employees and you know how to do development. In the PHP community, we have PHP mentoring, which is a community-based initiative to match mentees with mentors. It is a very formal thing where you can go online, you can browse a list of people who have declared themselves as mentors, you can contact them. You can find me on that website, and if you contact me, I guarantee you I probably won't respond, and I'm sorry. Contact me on Slack, that's a much better thing. I have had over the years several formal mentees and mentors, and the best value I've ever gotten was all of the unofficial relationships. mentors, people in this room that I've mentored, people that have mentored me, even if they don't realize it. I've learned a crap ton from Mike, especially around Windows and administration and some really crazy internal Mac stuff. Is stuff that I've picked up from Mike. And I've been able to, give, and isn't that scary, Mike? It's terrifying. But it's that people have those expertise, right? Mike works at a company that he does system administration all day long, and he solves really weird problems. And he has to solve problems with the SEC looking over his shoulder, so he's got to do it a certain way. So I'm fairly confident when I go to Mike and ask a question, he's not going to tell me something that's going to have the SEC bring down my net or whatever. But at the same time, I'm not going to go to Mike to talk about my really complex PHP problems. I'm going to go find somebody in the PHP community. So finding your personal network. If you don't understand this, ask Mike, he'll explain it. So find that, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was literally just going to ask, for each of you, you have your PHP network where there is literally a list of people that you can reach out to and say, hey, help me. For the last year, 2 years, I've been trying to help pair people with like mentors throughout the Southeast. And that is the most common thing in these smaller to like mid-sized communities is they're scared to come to these meetups. They're scared to talk with people because they don't know shit and they know that, but they still want to learn. They still want a job. So each of you have learned some ways. Maybe it was alone. Can you tell us like just maybe the website that you just said, maybe that's the thing, because I know that some people here might be trying to learn PHP, but for you, for your language set, for your skill set, what could beginner do tonight and like find results maybe in the next month? Like be better off, I guess. Not get a job, obviously.
Yeah, so for the PHP world, if you're interested in PHP, there's a website called phptherightway.com. That is a community source best practices, how to get started in the community, how to get started writing PHP literally the right way, because there are several wrong ways out there. With any language framework. If you would like an exhaustive list of how to write bad PHP, my GitHub is available for public consumption. Feel free to go browse anything I've ever written. You guys have any language specific or general onboarding?
If you want to learn Ruby, there's a lot of stuff. If you want to learn like Rails is probably a good place to start. And there's a book, the Rails Guides or the Rails Tutorial by Michael Hartle, and it's kind of like the industry. Like when you you go to RailsConf and Michael Hartle is there, like he's surrounded by people because a lot of people have read that book. There used to be a site called Try Ruby, but it's dead.
Because people stopped trying Ruby.
The Ruby on Rails documentation is pretty good.
Yeah, the
Honestly,
Rails
Ruby on
guides,
Rails
yeah.
documentation was, I think, the first thing like that that really stuck for me, because it was just laid out so well, and right, I guess I didn't even really have to Google very hard, because I just knew what part of the docs to go to. It just didn't used to be that way. It was man pages, it still is nasty, but like, that stuff is very nice. I like all of the by example websites, like Go by example, for example, right? And in fact, I think the way that I learned Go was one afternoon, I went through gobyexample.com and I wrote everything on it, and then I made it run. And then every time I needed to do that again, well, I just went right back there and I just copy pasted it, right? So then over time I didn't really have to do that as much. But Go is a small language, right? And you can kind of do it that way. There's not every language you can do that with, I think, but there's a couple of those by example websites. I don't know how many there are these days.
I feel like that's kind of a norm now. Just, if you want to learn Rust, you don't have to go buy some Rust book. You just go to like the Rust website and it walks you through everything.
Well, that comes back to my comment on how you learn. Because like for me, those sites are useless. Just because I can't make myself learn that way. But Laracast.com, which is a PHP learning heavily focused on the framework.
Like videos.
Do what?
That's like what?
No, I'm saying, for example, if you like learning by videos, Laracast, Railscast, SymphonyCast in the PHP community. There's a Go version as well, I think, out there.
What's the one you watch all the time, George?
Oh, Front-End Masters.
Front-End Masters.
Front-End Masters. There's some great videos on that.
Yeah.
But to me, I don't know, it's always been, if I don't type that code, even if I, I'm never gonna be able to do it,
Yeah.
right?
That's how I am.
And I think that's really frustrating for, at least, like teaching kids, right? Like, the typing part is hard, and I think in terms of momentum, right? I always have a very hard time opening the editor and getting going. So sometimes I just write if statements and little loops, and I'll just, I'm really not trying hard enough, honey, you know what I mean?
So if you, I go to Safari online,
Yeah.
Safari Books Online, because they have, if you wanna learn the whole thing, they've got all kinds of video, or they've got learning paths where it gives you a list of books to start from A to Z on whatever topic you want.
Yeah.
And the R class, or the R group is made up in 226, so. So you guys got a little bit of time, you don't have to leave it.
Real quick, I would actually like to go back to one of your questions. Second question was like, how do you know like what to learn? That is actually something that like still plagues me to this day, even though like I'm a professional developer. It's because like, I really, like Joe was talking about a fork in the road. Like I was like, I either need to do like PHP or Ruby, and then I went Ruby, but like I could have done PHP, and there's jobs for both. So like, I guess my advice for that is just do whatever like interests you that maybe there's jobs for too.
Yeah, I agree.
When people are asking me what should they learn, and they're talking about languages or frameworks, I tell them, find a language that has a syntax that you don't absolutely hate. Because if you hate the syntax, if you hate semicolons, you are not going to enjoy PHP. So
I like things.
That's the only thing I don't like.
I don't know how to put this. I think especially beginners get analysis paralysis so hard, right? And like what I liked about Rails is that it was convention over configuration. It was that if you do these things in these particular ways, it will work. You can have a website that works, right? And then for beginners, that's a great idea, right? So I'm not going to say you could learn all these things. I'm going to say go learn Python, right? Just go do it. Don't worry about it, right? Start there. You'll find something else, maybe, I don't know, right? But
you may find yourself in Django.
Right.
And Django is a fantastic framework. You may find yourself in Flask, which is a Python micro framework.
Yeah, I'm forced to learn Python this semester.
Okay.
So it's,
Yep.
So
Smart.
one thing to leave you with, because I kind of take another approach. You can jump into a language like Python. Another thing you can do is kind of get a gauge of several languages. So if you take, for instance, PHP, Ruby, and Python, you're going to see the same thing across all three languages. They all have a sort of predominant framework, like Ruby has Rails, Python has Django, PHP has Laravel, and they all have package managers and ecosystems. And once you start to look at three different languages and compare, like, what's the predominant framework? What kind of people use this language? Is there a package manager? You start to see that all these ecosystems are sort of the same. And then when you dive into Python or dive into PHP, you have a lot of context. And if you start learning PHP and then get a job writing Ruby, all that time you spent learning Laravel will translate directly over to Rails or over to Django if you're doing Python. So there's a lot of consistency. And Rails gets mentioned a lot because it kind of established a lot of those conventions for good documentation, developer experience, ease of learning, that kind of stuff.
thanks for letting me crash your thing.
Sorry, I just
No, you're fine.
I do want to say, like, I tried to teach myself programming for years, and I had to go back to school to do it. But there's a lot of people who would be good at programming who don't go back to school, even though they kind of need to, because they're afraid of math.
Yeah.
I dropped out of computer science here because of that. I was in like advanced algorithms and data structures, and I was in like college algebra. So I was like, this isn't gonna work. So,
But at least you tried.
I tried, and I'm still paying for a degree I don't have. So.
I mean, I am too. This is my 4th university, dude.
Is the lack of math, is that a hindrance? I mean, obviously you should have some basis, right? Like you should understand basic
I
formulas,
became a programmer as a hobbyist years and years ago because I hate math. But I knew how to write programs to do the math for me. I couldn't do the math, but I could understand how the math worked, so I could program it. And my teachers hated me in middle school and high school because I would just write everything in my calculator and just plug in numbers, and I would have all this code running. And I couldn't show my work, and I got bad grades because of that, but I had all the answers correct. And I learned a lot more than the teacher thought I was because I was learning how to code all this on a TI calculator. So, yeah, math is a...
Probably understood the math better than...
Maybe, probably so. But all that to say, don't let math keep you back from a CS or developer career, because unless you're getting down into where you're trying to create the most efficient sort algorithm that the world has ever seen, you're going to be okay with just basic algorithm knowledge and basic CS math.
I hired a pharmacy tech that was learning programming over a PhD in computer science one time. And like, honestly, that really bothered me at the time, but the pharmacy tech could just show me that he could do it, right? Like, and I don't think he had any math background, and he ended up being a great engineer. And I'm sure that the PhD would have also been a great engineer, but he fit the mold that I needed at the time, right? But like, I think that everything pertaining to math in school is, can you put logic statements in order, right? Because that's all that the programming bits is. That's just can you work through a problem? Like,
I would say most of us developers in this room probably just are putting text in boxes on a screen. It's not, you're not doing like crazy computational sorts. Like you're just doing, like taking stuff out of the database, put it on the screen. It's not.
To my knowledge, none of the programmers in this room wrote any code that launches a human into orbit. And
Not a real human.
If I'm incorrect, we have a new topic for next month. Please speak up, because I would love to hear all about this. But for me, at the end of the day, I help churches keep their congregations connected online through websites. I do that with a variety of tools, with a lot of bubblegum and tinfoil and zip ties and PHP. And duct tape for the people. Yeah, the screams, the internal personal agony. No, it's just, these are just the tools that I can use. And you've heard me crack jokes, and the rest of the panel has been very good about not cracking too many jokes back at me. But I love the language wars. I embrace the language wars because being a PHP developer, I kind of had to suffer that because PHP is the laughing stock for several years. Now PHP is really awesome, and we've kind of outgrown, or trying to outgrow it. It's like, when I see that face. And so I like ribbing people about the language choices and the career paths, just also because I can see, like I said earlier, the different paths my own career could have taken, and how I could have been any one of the developers in this room. That career, I could have had the same career.
It might be from the data side, but even someone as great, and if you ever look him up, you'll understand why Brett Ozark. He's one of the greatest DBAs that had around MVP for years. He's fantastic. He point blank answered somebody the other day on LinkedIn when they asked him, you need a college degree to do what you do. And he said, because I've quit several times. No, you don't need it. It's a mindset. You can find somebody in accounting, sales, wherever, that have the mindset to develop.
I think only one of us has a computer science. Do you have computer science?
Yeah, Dad wanted me to get it.
Okay. So, out of 4 of us, yeah.
But I got that first job pretty easy, so I don't know, like that's what I needed,
that's
right?
the benefit, right?
Yeah, right.
The only
I say easy, Rick will be
The
bad,
main code that I write is a financial planning. I suck at math. I don't have a degree. But I'm writing financial planning modeling tools for wealth managers.
It goes back to knowing how you learn though. For me, I had to go back to school to learn how to program because I needed to be accountable to somebody. Yeah. So.
And the same goes for math. If you're like, I stumbled my way into this programming thing randomly, and I don't know how I got there. But over the years, I've definitely been drawn back to that classical stuff. The math parts and like the computer science parts that I sort of glossed over. But I also think that because I want to learn those sort of on my own accord, and I'm actually, inclined to learn about them other than, just following a curriculum, I get more out of it personally, and I feel more rewarded going and learning that stuff. So you don't have to know math, but it's also, you don't not have to learn math either. Like, you can go learn that stuff that's, traditionally been kept behind that academic gate on your own now. We have the internet. You can go take Harvard courses online and stuff and learn that stuff. And then the math part is not scary anymore. Like, you sort of know it. So always be learning.
The only thing in my career that is a hindrance is just that I feel bad that I didn't finish my degree. Like, I just regret it, but like that hasn't affected my work at all. It's probably because my sister has like 2 masters and a PhD, and then I dropped out of college. So.
It evens out.
Yeah.
My sister's
You're up here.
my sister's my sister is a vet, so she's a doctor, and I'm a programmer.
Yeah.
I'm a little PHP dev.
I homeschooled and then dropped out of college. My parents are real proud.
So going back, that's a lie. Going back to
They're not proud.
They're not proud at all. Going back to damn it, Jason, I lost it. Just the middle picture of Jason's parents sitting in front of him and his kids and his wife, just laughing at him for his career choices. Just kind of took over my brain. Sorry. So going back into how we broke or how to break into the industry and how you got your first job, it sucks. You're going to probably have a really crappy job, your first 1 or 2 jobs, and you may not realize how crappy they are, especially if you get one that pays halfway decently, until several years later.
And it's so exciting just to get.
Yeah, and it's so exciting that somebody gets that somebody's going to pay you to sit in an office all day or an open office,
All
which
night.
is even worse, or all night.
Or an open office.
Yeah. So it's but don't be afraid to pay those dues. Everybody does. I certainly did. I stayed at a job 5 years too long. A lot of why I stayed at that job was because it was the devil I knew. I was comfortable. It was easy. I could learn whatever I wanted over whatever time period I wanted. My actual job output was about 15 hours a week, and the rest of my 40 hours I filled teaching myself the next thing, how to do whatever I was doing better, and teaching myself, and I really valued that. And I stayed at this job way too long. So don't ever turn down an interview. Even if you're happy with your job, like I run a team at Ministry Brands, and I have interviewed 3 or 4 times in the year and a half, about a year and a half that I've been at Ministry Brands. I've interviewed a handful of times in different places. Not because I'm necessarily looking to leave Ministry Brands right this second, but I want that industry experience. I want to take as many interviews as I can. I want to see how other people are interviewing, see what kind of curveballs they're throwing me. If they're going to want me to navigate an AST, an abstract tree syntax? Syntax tree.
From the non-developer, thank you.
Yeah, from the non-developer, the grammar person. If they want me to do that, I'm out the door because I'm not going to be able to do that. There are very big reasons why I don't work for Google. It's ASTs and computer science and stuff like that. But don't let that discourage you from applying anywhere else. And don't be afraid don't be afraid in an interview to tell somebody you don't know. My old boss that still works for the company, when he interviewed me, he asked me, he has the standard terrible interview questions that I hate, that is, so tell me how you would, the question was, tell me how you would validate an email address and show me the regex that you would use. And I shit you not, I laughed in his face on the phone and said, I have no idea what the regex would be, but I know where to go, and I know enough to tell you that I probably don't want to use regex because it's probably not going to be the most efficient way of doing it. There's probably language constructs that will help me out a little bit faster than regex, and will probably be more up to date with high-level TLDs than any regex would be. And for the next 2 minutes, I wasn't sure if the call was over or if he was just taken aback. But he goes, well, that's not the answer that I was looking for, but I'll take it. It's like, damn right you will.
So how do you get to that interview, though?
You pay your dues.
Well,
It sucks.
And
Yeah.
as a current intern who needs to find a new job for January,
So I was able.
how do I find that?
So I was able
Are
to
you
say.
willing to move?
No, because I still have to do school.
I understand, right?
I also
I mean, my
can't,
argument, I guess, is
like-
that they're like, there's such a demand.
Mhm.
people
Yeah.
like us. Just it absolutely is.
If
Right.
you're willing to
Like,
move, for
that-
sure.
But that said, Brian, like, there's tons of jobs here, and like, I'm actively here, like, willing to hire people, right? You know what I mean? I'm not involved in the hiring process anymore, right? But Euclid wants me to say that. But like, here's the thing, in my opinion, is that I completely echo what you said about just take as many interviews as you can, especially early on, right? And be nice about it, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't like string people along or, you know, lie to their face, you know what I mean? But like, you're not gonna get an offer in all this that you go through. I don't know, it feels like rejection therapy to a certain extent, right? Like, you know,
To a certain degree it is.
Yeah,
so-
it's practice.
Short of moving, like this industry has a ton of remote jobs.
Yeah.
So there are lots of remote job boards, and we can
That's-
certainly get
that's
an interview
good.
at those. Because they're all looking for juniors, you know,
But-
seniors are all not used up, but just they're all taken. And,
I
you know,
guess
securing their positions.
I am cautious about taking a remote job as my first non-academic research
If
assistant
you've
kind of
never
job.
worked remote, I would probably not take your first job remote, or if you
I would.
did, I would take it at a
I would
company
too.
that has a very well-established
Once you do it, you
remote
can't go back.
culture, that can teach you how to do that. Something like GitHub or Automatic, the company that owns WordPress. These companies that have been remote since day one, they have figured out this remote culture stuff. And they may have issues elsewhere, but they have figured out the remote culture thing. And my first remote job was working for an agency up in New York, and I got lucky. I had dodged a lot of the big warning things with remote working, and none of them really affected me in any serious way. But it can be challenging, especially if you don't have a dedicated workplace in your house. I have an office in my house, and that is where I go work. That's also where I play video games. You just have to be able to separate that out. You have to be able to close the work laptop at 5 o'clock or whatever, and be able to unplug and disconnect as much as you can.
I had such a hard time with that.
It's work-life balance is such an important thing.
Just
Yeah.
quick announcement, it's 7 o'clock, we don't have to quit, but if anybody's here for data science, they're across the hall. So, feel free to leave, we won't feel bad. But we can keep going.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
go ahead.
The paying your dues part is not only, for me, it wasn't only like doing interviews and like taking the less glamorous jobs, it was like busting my ass at night, like when I got home from work. Like, I was newly married, and like anytime my wife like was asleep, I was just sitting at the computer, like it was dark with a glowing screen. It was like stock photo of a hacker. But like those like small projects I did, like things I learned, just like building stuff like Scratch and Itch, helps me like on my resume more than I thought they would, or at least be able to talk to people in interviews, because people are like, "Can I see your code?" And I'm not like a real big open source guy, so I'm still like, no, because I don't have any code to show. But like having those side projects at least starting off shows that like you at least know what you're doing, or like you can grasp the concept of programming.
I'll
One
echo
thing-
that. Yeah, a lot of my early development before I had my first job was, 8 to midnight every night of the week, and it was brutal. But at the end of it, I had enough vocabulary and I could speak about it well enough that I could land an interview. I can certainly, I have the resume. Here's the code. I can answer any question you have about Rails ORM because I fought the battle so many times already. And like they can tell that on the interview that you fought the battle, you've gone through these things. So I think a lot of it is sucking it up and writing a project.
I'd like to share kind of like a testimonial about interviews, because I think it's something that comes up a lot. And, I have sort of some stories of my experiences with getting interviews. So I got my first job in web development at UT because I was working at the help desk, and I started asking the web people a bunch of questions. So they sort of invited me to work over there, and I didn't know anything. So after being there for a few years and going to user groups and stuff, and knowing Joe through PhD, he at the time working at AOL actually encouraged me to interview there. And this wasn't like, I'm going to get you a job thing. It's I work at AOL. of this job. So I applied, I got an interview, they flew me out to Dulles, Virginia, and you know, it's an interview, it's not a big deal. It's not like you're getting married or anything. You just fly out there, it's an interview, and it's just as much, like Kevin said, rejection therapy and me interviewing the company as much as it is them interviewing me. So this was like first real interview for this sort of thing. It was like a Silicon Valley, 7 interviews in a day, like live programming kind of thing. And I just remember the whole time I felt completely relaxed because it was just like hanging out with people in a room like this. And I've been going to user groups, I was accustomed to talking to people like you are, and, I didn't do great on some of the programming stuff, but I got through it, and I didn't get the job, but that experience was just huge. That was like a turning point. I was like, I want to do all the interviews now. I got obsessed with it, and the first place I called was Zerg. So if you've ever used Foundation, it's like Bootstrap. It's managed by a company out of California named Zerg, and they said they were hiring, so I called them and got an interview with their lead engineer. And I'm just some guy, interviews are not that big a deal to the people who are trying to hire somebody. They're just interviewing people, And so maybe you blow them away and they hire you, but if not, it's just on to the next one. So sure, this guy's gonna take a call. So I did a phone interview with his lead engineer from some software I use, and he asked me a lot of tough questions. And kind of like what Joe said, a lot of them were like, I don't know, but I know exactly where to go to find that information. And then as soon as I got off the call, I went and Googled it and like locked that stuff in, so I knew it. And then the third interview I had was AutoZone, and they just hired me. And that was kind of unexpected. I was like in it for the interviews. I wasn't trying to get hired. So they're like, we'll pay you a ton of money. And so I took that job, and then for a year, I worked at AutoZone, and then some, the company I work at now sort of came to me and wanted to interview me, and I turned them down a couple times because I worked at AutoZone, I was working on a big project and stuff, but you can get interviews. Like, the best way is to just talk to people and know people and watch that job posting board and that kind of stuff. But also just take interviews just to take them. Don't feel bad. I kind of disagree with what Kevin said to some extent. Like, sure, don't lie to people and say like things that aren't true, but don't feel bad about like wasting somebody's time taking an interview. They're trying to hire somebody. So interview as much as possible. Get used to that experience, do it often, and then it's like not a big deal. So that's a big topic. That's kind of one to share.
That I would add to that maybe is that at one point, one bit of context I haven't shared is that I had twin daughters at 21 on accident in college. That'll light a fire under your ass. Like, it just, yeah, it really honestly did. So like, over time I just had to make it all work. And a part of that just interviewing for me was just like, what am I worth? Like, I'm like, honest to God, like, I hear salaries about the coasts, and their real estate markets are crazy. That's just ridiculous, and it's apples and oranges. But like, I don't know, like that work turned out well, I suppose, is the moral of the story, right? Like, I got raises and other jobs, and I didn't bounce around a ton, but it was good to know that I was worth more than just what I had been making right out of college.
One thing I will caution you is, and I'm very opinionated about this, and I'm not sure if the panel will share some of these opinions, but we'll see. The job will never love you back. A good friend of mine, Samantha, taught me that, and she taught me that when she helped me get the job at AOL. And when I got laid off by AOL, it was a pretty rough day. I got laid off because the company merged with Yahoo. I was caught up in all that, and I got laid off. The company will never love you back, and that's fine. You've got to remember your job is a business transaction. You are not a family unless you legitimately are related to your boss, and in that case, that's weird, but been there, done that, don't recommend it.
You should probably find another job.
You should probably find another job. But the job will never love you back, and it is a business transaction, don't ever forget that. I really, really dislike companies that say, oh, we're a family. And my friend Cal, who wrote the book that we're giving away, has a great saying. If the company is telling you that they're a family, stop doing your work, stop taking a shower, stop changing clothes, and just go live in their basement and see how long you're still a family. Because I bet it's not long. I hate seeing people get laid off, and I hate seeing people fired, laid off, or whatever. And this hits a little close to home to me because we lost a handful of team members in one of our offices in Memphis this past couple weeks, and it was kind of unexpected and hard. And our company, I say our because there's another Ministry Brands person here. So it's Ministry Brands says we're a family, and they really push that family message. And I get it, I understand it, but I am not. We're not family. I am exchanging years of experience and a particular set of skills for that paycheck and for my expertise, and that's all it is. So keep that in mind especially if the job starts saying, oh, but we're family.
Yeah, so you sign an offer, that's what you've agreed to do, that's what they've agreed to do, is pay you a certain level, give you a certain level of benefits. Any more loyalty from you, I feel like you're limiting your career. Like, I swapped every year until I got to where I was like feeling pretty good about where I was.
Well, there is a fine line between taking ownership of a project you're working on and living and breathing the job. The big difference between your work life is really important. And if your boss or if the hiring manager you're interviewing with doesn't talk about work-life balance, ask about it. If they don't want to talk about it, it's a big red flag.
One time, I don't know if any of you know Kayla Townsend, but we interviewed her, right? And my favorite part of the interview, I'd been through like, I don't know, 10 of these interviews, right? At the very end, I said, do you have any questions? And she just opened her book to like all of them. And like, and like, I just really like, and I started to do that personally, just like, look, I've got a ton of questions for you if I'm gonna like want to work here. Work-life balance is the biggest, I think, because I've been heavily susceptible to that. And in fact, I ended up, this is not the only reason I quit a job, but I was awake at like 4 in the morning trying to get this thing over the line for this audit. And I woke up the kids, and the kids came in, and they said, Dad, you work too much. And I thought, oh man, you're right. Like, and I had to sort of scale that back. But like, the other bit of it was that sometimes, honest to God, I just got it all over the line for them, right? Just to show my worth or whatever, right? Get the next raise, get the next whatever.
You want to
the
prove
promotion.
yourself.
So, but there's it's a fine line, right? Like I totally overdid it many times, I think. And I got hurt, and it's like, just, get depressed and tired. There's always undertime after overtime. Is
burnout.
A managerial sort of thing they say, but I don't know. Like, and sometimes what you said just reminded me about this, because like every once in a while, I don't know, years ago, I don't really feel this way anymore, but I would feel like, God, I'm gonna lose my job if I don't get this over the line. Like, I told everybody I could do it. Why can't I figure this out? I hate this computer, but I can get another job. Like, I think everybody in this room can get another job, right? Right? So, I don't know, it's just.
I don't know, and that's never happened to me. Like, you push your deadline back, you miss the deadline.
I know, that's
it's
the
like,
thing, right?
It never really matters.
It really honestly
So that goes back to the statement I said earlier, where none of us are launching people into orbit. Deadlines are trivial in the grand scheme of things. My very first job that I worked at, a tech job, was a hair care company. They sold hair vitamins and hair loss products. Let me tell you, we were never under a end of the month deadline where we've got to get this e-commerce package in there so we can sell more hair loss pills or hairspray that covers up your bald spots or whatever. That was never a thing. The company did.
I haven't launched people in space, but I've written documentation for code that runs numerous scientific studies on humans.
Awesome.
Which is not the same
Well,
but
it's
also
important to
feels
tell
a
them how to
little-
run the application the right way, right? Because if you
Right.
don't, it could hurt somebody.
It feels a little more deadline sensitive than hair care products.
Yeah, understandable. It all
It sounds
depends
like
on what's
quality is
behind.
more important, right? I mean, is it on you to decide that, I guess?
My boss has been kind of harassing lately because I have been we're switching something in the code and I've been writing performance tests for it, but apparently I'm really bad at writing performance tests. Who knew that an intern would be bad at that? So I keep getting all these Slack messages after hours while I'm driving to go vote, and it's like,
Nope.
Yeah,
Nope.
yeah.
No,
I mean,
remove that from your phone.
again though, at different stages of your career, you know, you're willing and it's appropriate to put up with different things. So like,
Exactly.
I'm, you know, 6 or 7 years into this, and I'm still just every day going to work obsessed with learning, and I'm willing to like put up with some anxiety and like working late nights to learn stuff because I want to be, eventually want to be the kind of developer who just knows enough that I can just fix or do anything. And I found, you know, working in a job for a year where I stagnated and like learned nothing at work. Going from that to a small team where everybody's sort of way better than me, like I'm learning every day, and it was so worth it to make that jump. And later, you know, in my career, when I'm a little bit more experienced, I might be less prone to stay up till midnight, like trying to fix some dumb thing. But right now, I'm definitely in that sort of phase of my career, and that's years in. So maybe I'll still be doing that 5 years from now, but you know, it's
maybe, but like
you mentioned testing. I didn't get into a job where like testing was a consideration at all until just now. Like this is the first time I've ever been on a team that cares about that. So,
but where is the line for that? And like,
What do you mean?
you decide.
where's the line for how much bad management do I have to put up with before I'm just like,
It's much easier.
Done.
It's much easier to pass on bad management when you don't have when you don't have so many life constraints. And I know because you've talked about it in Slack a good bit, some of the stuff that you're having to be constrained with, school hours, and you work for a company on campus, right? Because that's more efficient than you having to drive out to a commute and then come back or whatever. So when you're not tied to school like that, it's a lot easier to just be like, this is dumb, I'm out.
yeah,
So-
but like I have considered today, quitting my job today on campus in my field and going to work for Walmart for the rest of the semester.
Okay, I actually have a really sort of like personal rule for this. I remember when I was in high school, I worked at a grocery store, and I learned years later there's actually a curve where like if you work for a grocery store a certain number of years, like the probability that you will work there the rest of your life like skyrockets. And I go in that grocery store and there's still people that work there when I was there. But like I remember when I got that job, I said like 2 years I'm out. If I'm still working here in 2 years, like I quit, no questions. But I think, you know, when I got on the UT, I was like thrilled and amazed. And I stayed there for like 5 years because like it was a privilege to work there. But then at some point in that 5 years, that voice sort of woke up. It was like, is it time to leave here?
I think that was you and I yelling at him.
Perhaps, but I think at every job, like right now, the current job I'm at, I'm thrilled and amazed. I love every day. I love the team, and I'm like, I'll work here the rest of my life. But at some point, you get to that point where you've learned like way too much, and you're like, am I doing everything I can be doing? Like, do I need to start moving? And sometimes you don't realize that voice is talking to you, but you kind of got to be like alert and listening for it, because as soon as you start hearing that, it's time to start looking and really start like career strategy stuff to think about where you're going to be in a year or 2 years. Because when you're at a job and you have a job right now and you're in a good place and you realize that it's time to leave, it's like the best position you can be in, because you can go anywhere and do anything. Like, just start stacking up interviews, and like inevitably by accident, like, one day you'll get an offer, and, so I don't know, I think about that a lot, like, you gotta kind of know when it's time to jump, or when you start thinking about whether it's time to jump.
And
so
once you've made the decision that it's time to go, you need to have, as a professional, you need to have a certain amount of grace towards the old job. If you're in FinTech Slack, you'll see somebody going through this exact same situation right now, who arguably may not be handling it in the greatest of ways. That's just a lesson that, people need to learn, and they learn on their own time. There is a specific section in this book. It's called Going Pro. I'll get to you in just a second.
You're good.
It's called Going Pro. It's written by a good friend of mine, Cal Evans. It's a very short read. You can knock it out in probably a couple hours, if not sooner. Use this URL. You can get this book absolutely free. If you go download the book, do me a favor and tweet at Cal Evans and tell him thank you. Let him know people actually read this stuff. That's kind of a joke. But there is he covers this, and there's a certain amount of grace and tact and humility that you need to have when you turn in your notice at your job and you're just working out your notice. Don't give up. You are still entitled and should be compelled to give as much on the last day as you did the first day. And that goes to what Josh was saying about signing. You sign that contract. That employment contract is pretty binding. Less so, not super binding in Tennessee because of at-will working and all that concept, but put in your best effort, and as long as you're able to do that, you're being a professional, in my opinion.
One thing about that is that, like, honestly, I have managed people at different sort of paths along the way, and some people want to move up, want to make more money, right? Some people, honest to God, don't. They want to come to work every day, and they want to slam out their code, and they want to go home, right? And that I somewhat have, and I think other people do too, it's not just me, have expectations, right? Like, if, are you treating this job as an hourly job? Are you treating it with the respect that it needs? Or, like, are you taking ownership of problems and helping solve larger problems and things like that? And, I think it's really honestly just like person to person, right? Like, what do you want out of your job? Like, what you can, and honestly, my old boss used to say that there's a biking metaphor where in the Tour de France, you're not always at the front of your group. That's the peloton that's taking all the wind resistance. And every once in a while, you kind of move back from the peloton and take a break and move back, and that's when you grow. But to me, I wanted to move up, right? I needed more jobs. I needed more money, honestly. There's no other way to put it, right? And so I think that there were lots of times where I confused sort of maybe an abusive sort of like boss situation, like maybe you described, with if I get this over the line, it'll work, right? Like this is the one. And that's an interesting trap to be in, and it's, I think for me over the years, I kind of got to the point where it was, I kind of have my own personal limits about like, as long as I put in my effort every single day, right? And I finish the things I say I'm going to get over the line, or if I honestly can't, bad news doesn't get better with time. It's really the most important thing along those lines, right? Just communicate early and often. And I did my best, right? And if the boss, like, honestly just can't work with you in a situation like that, there's better places to be, right? But you kind of got to put in what you want to get out of it. It's like a fine line as to whether or not someone is treated as if they are taking ownership in a problem or not.
It sounds like you're learning testing, which is something that you don't learn in school as much. You don't learn on the job in many jobs, many junior level jobs. So, there might be value there. Like
I have learned things in this job, but I feel like I could have learned a lot more if my particular boss was 10% smarter at people and 10% less smart at computers.
Yeah, high pressure deadlines don't work on any team. I mean, like, it's, as you get better jobs, you'll see less and less of that. You'll maybe set goals and evaluate, well, we didn't make that goal, and you'll evaluate why it might have been the case. base, but there's never like, we've gotta hit this date or y'all are not getting your bonus. It's just not, you need to have trust that mistakes, missed deadlines are not held up, like, over you, against you. You know, most teams want you to feel secure that like, you can try new things and try new ways and fail, and have security to fail.
Yeah.
That's not, you know, that, it takes a while to get to a place like that probably, though. Most entry-level jobs aren't gonna have that.
Another thing I think is worth mentioning is keep kind of those channels open, because for some people, burnout will creep up on you like that. And when that happens, you can end up screwed up for months afterwards because your brain just fries itself because you're freaking out all the time. Nothing seems to be going right. So if you have all that lined up, the moment you feel that coming up, you can reach out to the people around you and say, hey, I really think I need to do something different. So if you feel that you're getting burned out, it's hopefully you already have those connections, but it's definitely the time to start making them.
Well, you guys are already here. I've kind of been feeling that, but I really need to finish school.
So y'all are, I mean, we're talking about bad bosses and things like that and switching jobs, but I work at a pizza place. I don't have a degree in anything. I'm just learning this stuff, right? And I feel like I'm fairly proficient in Python. I've made a couple applications and things like that. So I want to start interviewing. I want to start putting my application out there. But you know, everything says degree with, you know, comp sci or something comparable or work experience. I have none of these. What looks good, I mean, to y'all at least, what looks good on a resume that would at least get me to the interview so that I can go get an abusive boss and then figure out about, like...
Yeah, so step one to getting an abusive boss is apply anyway. Don't let anything in the job description dissuade you from applying, especially when you're starting out. A lot of times people will realize that somebody with enough motivation to learn and to do is just as good as somebody with a degree.
Does that turn to even different? So if I know Python, right, but they're asking to know like Ruby or C++.
As long as you're willing to learn one of those things and demonstrate that you can solve problems using whatever tools they're going to provide you with, and that includes a language. If they're going to turn you down and not give you a junior level opportunity based on that, you don't want to work there anyway.
And it's the secret. So rejection rate will be higher. If you have Python experience, you apply for Ruby, but there are places that are like, well, this is a junior position. Python's pretty damn close to Ruby, and he seems to know it well. In my opinion, get your stuff on GitHub, because that's like the first thing that any employer is going to look at. Is like, what does he have on GitHub? And if you have like your app code on GitHub?
I can't figure out how to use it yet. I'm getting taught by
There you go.
another guy.
That's the guy to ask right there.
Yeah, I can do that to help you.
That's actually up on the YouTube channel now as well.
Also, have you been to the Python user group?
I didn't know there was one.
So so there's a Python user group, and the guy who runs it, Brad Montgomery, is like the Memphis Python guy. So yeah, like he's the guy to talk to if Python is kind of the path that you're on.
There also could be an opportunity with startups. A lot of times startups, especially if you can get paired with another technical founder that like a CTO or somebody in that leadership role, and you come into the organization as a junior developer or something, that could be a way in as well. Just don't ever take an equity only offer. Get cash, get paid.
I need money.
Yeah, money.
So my first professional job was I actually applied for like 25 Ruby jobs probably, and I interviewed with like 4 or 5 of them. But I got turned down for all of them. The first job I actually had was like working on WordPress, and I don't particularly enjoy WordPress, but like it was my foot in the door. And then like 8 months later, like I got a big job offer. So take the one team if you don't know it, because like it could just really be a stepping stone.
So it goes back to that lying but not lying, like That's what I mean. How do you know it's too
The
far?
worst thing
like,
you could do is misrepresent your skills.
Yeah.
If you interview and you get hired and you've just blown smoke the entire time, on day one it's going to be very obvious, and at that point the company has invested financial dollars in hiring you and onboarding you and providing equipment, software licenses, all that kind of stuff. If you've misrepresented yourself there, that's probably the worst thing you could do.
So surely like
Be
somebody.
upfront and honest.
How do people get hired that, like, that have misrepresented themselves?
I have
Like,
no
don't know,
idea, but I've seen it in every company I've ever worked for.
You know, I don't know.
So,
Yeah.
I also want to say, because I've seen you at Code Connective, I met a guy at Code Connective, I think the first time I went, and, you know, he didn't talk much, but, like, I started talking to him, and this was a guy who was, like, 18, straight out of high school, worked at Dollar General, but he'd been, like, studying web development and React and stuff for a year, and, like, the first time I met him, after, like, a 15-minute conversation, I was telling like everybody I knew, like somebody has got to hire this kid because he's like really good. And I've interviewed a bunch of people before, and very few of the interviews that I've been involved in, where I'm the one interviewing, have involved a great candidate. There have really been only just a few. A lot of times it is somebody who just like got out of comp sci and is sort of out of touch with the landscape and has HTML and SQL on their resume, and like that's about it. But here's a kid who was like straight out of high school, worked at Dollar General, didn't have any sort of formal background, but he had learned all this stuff on his own, and he had actually built like a Rick and Morty like encyclopedia thing, and it was on GitHub, and it was hosted on GitHub, and you could actually go use it, and it had like every like character and stuff from Rick and Morty, and it was all built with React and stuff. And so after like I told everybody I knew that they should hire him, we ended up hiring him in AutoZone when I was there. So, and now he's like a rock star at AutoZone. So you can go learn all this stuff yourself, put it up on GitHub, prove what you know, and nobody can say you can't. You know, it's you can get that job. There's no credentials required. Like you can totally go from like pizza place to Fortune 300 company, like with a year of hard work.
The other thing I heard out of that though is like just meet people, like come to these events.
Yeah, get involved in the community.
Because like George is saying, like George was the one going around telling all these people like that connection is what helped get a job. Like,
and people love those stories, man. Like if you can be on that team that hires, like they can tell that story. Like, yeah, we hired this kid from a pizza shop, and now he's like one of the best people on our team. Like, you know, people like to hire people who are into what they're doing. So the fact that you're here and you're learning and stuff, and I've seen you around, like that's how you get jobs.
The local community is really, really powerful in building that network and finding jobs. The first technical job I ever found is the only technical job I've had since 2005 that the community didn't help me find. Every job I've had since then has come from somebody in the Memphis community has made a connection, or somebody in the PHP community has made a connection with me and their company and brought me in. Even my current job, I was referred by a guy in the Memtech Slack. So, you know, build connections. You never know who, especially true for me, but you never know who in the Memtech community is going to be a future coworker of yours. So it's really, and Memphis is a really small town in the grand scheme of things, especially in the tech industry. So a lot of these agencies know each other.
So one last question, is how do I say it? So when I was like 16, I'm 22 now, but when I was 16, I watched I don't know if you've seen like The Social Network, the Mark Zuckerberg. I watched that and I was like, oh, I want to remake that. So I made a quasi social network. I mean, all the running functionalities. That was years ago, you know, and I gave up PHP because I did that and I was like, I'm done. You know, there's nothing else to do, and the code's gone. Is there any reason to mention that on a resume?
I think
Yes.
you should.
Yeah.
Like,
Anytime you've done a thing that you can talk about and you can demonstrate. So here's what interviewers want to hear. They want to hear you talk about how you solve the problem and the steps in the workflow you use to solve that problem. Because what we really do is not write code to solve problems. We solve those problems. We just write code to do it, right? It's this idea that I can do anything with PHP isn't necessarily true. I mean, I can, but it's not always the right tool for the job. Sometimes I'm going to have to lean into Ruby and do something in Ruby because it's the right tool for the job. That doesn't mean you have to go learn all the languages. Learn one, get really good at one, then start venturing out would be my advice there. But be able to easily demonstrate and easily walk a layman through how you solved a problem with code and why you wrote the code a specific way, and that will speak volumes about you in the interview.
I think,
Practice like walking through the code you write with your friend who knows nothing about computers.
honestly, like talking about the difficulty, like, you know, your first code, like just the, like I fought through, like even if it's like the dumbest problem, like I couldn't figure out how to connect to my database or something. Like, even if you're like, I fought it for days and I like, you know, I Googled and I searched and I tried these 8 different things, but in the end you got through it, like those are just the stories that employers want to hear. Is there was a problem, I couldn't figure out how to fix it, you know, after a time I figured it out. Just the battle is a good part of it.
Even if you don't have the code anymore, like just being able to tell the story.
And yeah, like you mentioned on your resume, don't lie. So you don't have to say I worked at this place, but you can say like whatever year it was, like 2000 to 2002, I worked on this, you know, like social network app and then written in PHP with whatever other like things you want to say.
I think I got my first job out of college with a resume that had like a list of the projects I had been involved in, or I don't know, pertinent projects. I don't know what I titled it, but like it looked as good as the other part of it, right? Like,
there's a project section on LinkedIn too, so I try to keep that up to date. Like you'll put that stuff in projects, and like having a site with a blog where you can like write about those things. Like what I might do if I were in your place is take that experience I had doing that, even though it was years ago, and like do the same thing in Python, or go through the same sort of similar project with Python, and maybe have like a front end with something popular like React or Vue or Angular or something, and build that out and get it on GitHub. Then you can actually like post that project on your website and on Twitter and on LinkedIn, and have a link to the code and a link to the running app on GitHub, all for free. So like that's kind of the norm now. Like that's what I look for in interviews, and that's what I mean. Like you don't know the competition you're up against. Like I worked at AutoZone. We probably did 6 interviews when I was there, and like the vast majority of people don't have any GitHub account. They don't know anything about GitHub. You know, they don't learn anything outside of like what they learned in school, and they come to the table with this like 6-page long resume of like nothing that I care about. Like can't show me anything they've done. Meanwhile, like some kid who just got out of high school has like a GitHub account with like a whole career worth of like projects on it, like for free. Like nobody told him he couldn't do that, or you know. So that's kind of the norm now, I think, is like you can prove what you know so easily. Just gotta get on GitHub.
Yeah, my past several job interviews have not involved my resume at all. It's just a GitHub account, for better or worse.
I quit. It's rude to say this, but like at one point I was interviewing people, hiring people so often that if the screening call had gone well with the person that was screening them, I showed up there and I asked them questions and I dug into it. And like I may glance at it and ask some off the resume, but like fundamentally as a hiring manager, especially at Banno, where we used like technologies that were just sort of off the wall and wacky, and like I don't know why we did that, right? That was just sort of before my time. But has anyone in here written any Scholar?
A little bit.
A little bit, you know, like, but we didn't. You couldn't just go find a Scala programmer. You just couldn't do it, right? Especially in Iowa or here, right? So it was so much more important in that job. It's like, can you pick things up? Can I teach you stuff? Can I teach you stuff right now? Can you teach me stuff? Like, I don't know, like that.
Demonstrate your ability to learn.
That was the really, we had, what I just described didn't always work, right? Hired people, it didn't work out, right? But they got the job to begin with, and it was their time to shine, I suppose. But like, in your case, just being able to tell those stories of like, look man, I need a better job than pizzas. I've been doing all this on my own, like, that piques my interest in a heartbeat. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Just like being able to dig into it on your own and get over the line, like the database connection thing that you said.
Yeah, esoteric languages are a good like flag. You know, that's actually like in Passionate Programmer, like Chad Fowler talks about having to hire a bunch of people in India, and they had to hire like 1,000 people, and they just had like insane amounts of resumes, and none of the candidates were any good and stuff. So he filtered it out on small talk. He like filtered down only the people that had small talk on the resume, and it drastically reduced their candidate pool, and they found that like all those people were good candidates because they had gone and like learned that language on their own. So these days, if you have something like Go or Rust or Elixir or something like that maybe not everybody is doing, but like the really cool people are doing, that's a good sign too. So you can push all that stuff up to GitHub.
But I think there's like a point that I got out of that too, is like the hiring managers sometimes have to make decisions on like arbitrary qualifications, and that's like an example of like somebody who's like, pick an esoteric language and I'm throwing everybody else out. But I mean, who knows what it's gonna be? It could be like, this person was too egotistical for our team, or you just never know what the qualifications are for the hiring manager. So a lot of times it's just totally random. So like applying a lot increases your chances. Just, you know, interview a lot, like, and you'll find a team that'll work.
We've been interviewing for my team, and it's been really difficult because we're actually looking for a senior PHP dev, and it's been really hard because all the people that we've passed on so far, none of it was technical related. It was all, they didn't fit to what the company vision is, they didn't fit into the team dynamic, they didn't fit into what we value in terms of what we do for our customers, and in terms of being value focused and solution focused. So, and this is the first time I've been in this situation where I've been a hiring manager, and it's a scenario where I'm throwing more people out who could do the job because I have this very delicate ecosystem in my team that I don't want to disrupt with ego or whatever culture differences there may be. So it's kind of a pain because I can't find somebody for my team, but it's also nice knowing the company isn't letting me be that selective of the people we onboard. It speaks volumes about our upper management, to me anyway.
Yeah, my team that I'm on now is very like into building people up. I think, like, you know, I got this job. I've never written Ruby professionally before, and I told them that I was like, I did Rails work like 4 years ago, but
Are you hiring part-time?
I know that, man. I mean, the thing is, it's like the team meshed well, and I got along with everybody. And when I interviewed, we basically had a conversation, and there were a lot of those questions where, like, I don't know, but I know what you're talking about, and I can tell you some stuff about what you're talking about. And just that conversation is what sort of led me working with. But like Kevin said, you know, just that hearing that you're working on stuff on your own just like piques interest for hiring people. So anyway.
So something I heard a couple of days ago at an AIGA thing is design people actually have classes in college for how to make portfolios. So if we had something like you've been talking about, looking at code on GitHub, so if we had how to do a portfolio for developers, what kind of stuff do you think would be good for that? What advice, what general rules for how to make a good one?
So I would probably pick any, so I mean, the traditional go-to applications in this would be like a to-do app. You could build a blog, what I would say is probably pick a language and go build a blog. And give it some basic functionality like a back-end administration panel. But it doesn't have to be super fancy. It doesn't have to do everything that WordPress does. But maybe it takes a title and it takes the blog content and maybe it creates fancy URLs or whatever. That's just really a small feature set. But go do that in Python and then do it in Django and understand the trade-offs of Django where you have the administration panel kind of generated for you and you customize it from there. Then write it in Flask. You've now written the same application in 3 different forms of Python. So you will pick up all of the benefits of Django and all of the trade-offs that you get with Flask, as well as what you would get just writing raw Python. And then once you're content with that, jump to a different language, do it in PHP, do it in Ruby.
Or I would say, give a talk about that in Memphis Python and then go like post that on your blog.
Yeah,
That's part of
exactly.
your portfolio. Like Joe, somebody who speaks at like every freaking PHP conference. Like that's definitely like part of his portfolio. Is that like?
I have a speaker resume on my blog, and it's every speaking event that I've done at a conference is on there, and even the one that canceled on me. But it's one of those things where I want to be taken seriously as a technical speaker. This is my resume for speaking, quite literally, and this is what I send to conferences when I submit talks. I was like, if you need to know more about me as a speaker, here's my resume, here's my GitHub, here's my link, here's my joined in, which in the speaking world, joined in is like it's a feedback system. So all the talks that I've done at conferences that use this feedback system, you can go see the really horrible reviews where I gave a really bad talk, and you can see the really good ones, and you can kind of see what you get when you want to select me as a speaker or whatever. And a lot of speakers do that. It's a good way to get feedback, but building up that kind of portfolio, that kind of thing, I did it through Twitter. It's kind of how I built my network and my following, because, or the people I follow and my mentors and the people that I try to mentor and mentee and all that stuff. I built my network on Twitter because that's where the PHP community was. Figure out where the Python community is. It may be on Twitter, and I'm sure there's a big presence there on Twitter. Have you ever been to Pi Tennessee? Go to a Python conference. The regional conferences are super easy to get into. And working at a pizza place, you can probably line up a few days off to go to the event without too much hassle. So go to those events and find that community and get involved and figure out where those people are and go insert yourself in those places where that community is. The local tech community, if you're not in our Slack group, you should. You should join the Python channel. And you can ask all the Python questions you want 24/7, and there'll be somebody that'll.
And the job postings channel.
And the job postings channel, yeah. There's people all the time posting jobs there. And a lot of the jobs that I see come across there are junior friendly. They are organizations that will take a chance on somebody that may not have a job history that's trying to break into the market.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's GitHub, of course, and like building your own personal website helps a lot. I mean, even if you can do a WordPress blog, but I've like written my own website just for the heck of it. You know, that's even that alone is code you can put on GitHub, like just your personal website.
I would say it's important to like get that site up where you can publish your work, even if you're using GitHub Pages. But like, you know, if you got to get a WordPress site up to publish like what you're working on and what you're learning, that's such a great thing. And then, you know, building that out, you know, as a separate portfolio project. Like, don't let that hold you up from publishing, like blogging about what you're learning and stuff. Like, however you can get that stuff up on the web, like do it the easiest way possible, and then come back and, you know, build it out yourself if you want to. But like a lot of developers who like hate PHP, they still use WordPress because it's just easy and cheap and stuff. So like it doesn't have to be WordPress up.
It's also not that hard to write up just straight up HTML
Right, yeah.
and CSS. And
That's what you want to do. Just get it up there quick.
Is it important for like side projects that you put on GitHub and whatnot? It's important for those to be I guess live, somebody can use it, or just to have the code there?
It depends. For me, it depends, I guess. If you go look at my GitHub, I don't ever delete anything on GitHub. I'm a big believer in you can go see the great things I've done on GitHub, and you can go see the horrible things I've done too. Because I want people to be able to see where I came from and how I've evolved. And I want people to be able to see and and me being able to tell that story. So don't ever worry about something looking bad on GitHub. I promise you there's somebody with much worse code.
Yeah, I'd say volume over quality even, like,
Yeah.
it just shows you've done stuff.
Right.
I've done a lot of stuff, maybe.
I still have my CS1 coursework on GitHub, okay?
Yeah,
And let me tell you, I was learning loops. So.
The big thing that you can do is any code that you put on GitHub, go find out what the, if there is a formal code style for that language. Like Python has PEP8, PHP, we have our PSRs. Ruby has one that I can't remember. Rubocop. Go run your project through one of those linters that will fix all your code for you, and that will say a lot to anybody looking at your code, because they'll either say, okay, this person knows the code style, they know how to have a program fix their code style, and they care enough to actually go do that. And that says a lot about your project. Even if that's your project that inserts an HTML5 blink tag, and it's just like on confetti wallpaper that's like this GIF straight out of 1998. Doesn't matter, it's PEP8, it's perfect code style, right? The content isn't as important.
I mean, I'd say it helps if it is runnable, like,
yeah.
If there's like a link and it actually like, oh, look, it runs, because that's a whole skill set in itself, getting it, the code, deployed.
There's also like CodePen is a nice little playground where you can like do little web stuff. And, like if you want to like write a React project, you can get it in CodePen and share that. But also like, you know, GitHub pages, like Josh said, like getting your stuff actually up, published where people can use it is a skill set that's pretty important, even if you're not the one doing it work, you know.
The other thing I would say too is like, for me, when I was trying to like find like first jobs and stuff, like I try to put some of myself into what I build. So like I had a resume and then also had a Ruby application that you could run and like print out my resume. Like I just try to do something that like stands out, because
something clever. That's nice.
Yeah, because like I can't imagine, like I don't hire, but like I can imagine just getting like stacks of resumes. Like I wanted something where people would be like, oh, like this is stupid as hell, but I remember this person. So like
there's a very well-known agency up in Chicago. In the PHP community, they're really well known because they're a Laravel agency. They were one of the earliest agencies that adopted the Laravel framework. It's called Titan Co. And Adam Wathan is a developer that teaches a lot in the PHP community, and he works for himself now, but he worked for Titan Co. And I believe it was him that the story of how he got hired at Titan Co. was he built a website on why Titan Co. should hire him. And it was just this very elaborate PHP and fancy front-end JavaScript, and he built his own CSS grid and did all of the stuff, and it was just a walkthrough, like a scroll down the page of why they should hire this guy. That kind of thing, and putting that much effort into getting hired at one job may be a little overkill, but if you really want that job, and that's the kind of place that I would probably do the same kind of thing to get in at, because that's a very well-known, well-respected in the community company. So doing that, going to that extent or that extreme, there's nothing wrong with that, especially if it's for a place that you really know you want to work there, and you're really going to fit in.
I did that once. I tried to apply for a place that had a Kickstarter. I don't know, you guys remember the video game console called Ouya?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I applied there by basically scraping their Kickstarter page and like mapping everybody who was a backer.
Oh,
and
nice.
putting it on a Google map. And like, yeah, I got an interview, but they're like, all right, you ready to come to California? I'm like, well,
Yeah.
you know, need remote. But
Yeah.
I mean, like, you're definitely going to get in the door. It's
Yeah.
not great.
People want to talk to you when they see somebody go to that extent over their brand, over a brand that you have no personal investment in yet. People will want to talk to you about that kind of display or that kind of effort that you put forward. So
this isn't related to side projects at all, but like talking about like a place you want to work, like just learn about the company too. Like that's how I got the job I'm at now, and I really like that job. But like I knew a lot about that company, and they told me after they hired me, like my enthusiasm for like what they do really helps go a long way in my interviews.
In fact, I'd go one step further, and I've seen people just get scrubbed out of people I wanted to hire because my boss at the time was just like, they didn't show any interest in like what we do. Like, you know, like they just want a job. Not somebody wants a job. Not somebody wants to work here. That was his opinion. It was, I won't hire the guy, but like, you know, that actually is sort of worthwhile for some people, I guess. Because honestly, like, we can say all this stuff that's like good advice, but a lot of it's dice. It's just rolling dice over and over.
Yeah, I said that
right?
before. It's totally
Like,
arbitrary.
yeah,
I don't know why I'm
like,
here.
like, I don't know. Just listen to everybody talk. I've been thinking about, well, what did I do? And I think honestly, it was just anything to get in the door and then like just talk to him. I figured if I could just talk to him, I could probably get the job. And that didn't always happen, but it did enough times.
So what I'm hearing is I need to build a script that will dig up all of the emails to send resumes to and then automatically send those because I don't have time to do it all.
Yeah, you should also follow George around, because I think there's 3 people now that he's told stories that he got hired just by having him follow around George and all this. So
I mean, I see
that may
George
be
a lot, so
yeah.
I'm
And
already
suddenly
trying that.
George has 8 new stalkers.
Yeah.
Hey, I got my job from following people around too, so.
Hey. All right, we're coming up on about 2 hours. So any last advice from the panel? Go be a farmer.
I will reiterate what I said initially, which is that like you can build literally anything if you Google it enough. Like just there's nothing standing in your way other than new tabs and time, right? And getting mad at your computer and going to sleep and doing it the next day. Like it's just it's real honest to God tenacity. And there's so many good, well-paying jobs for people that can just open the next tab the next day and read the next thing and write that code, get it over the line. But
You make it sound so easy.
Huh?
You make it sound so easy.
I think he's saying it's not easy.
I
It
think
takes-
I'm
it
honestly
takes
saying,
real,
yeah,
like,
right, like, and then
you fight a battle, you win it, and it still doesn't work. You gotta fight another one tomorrow, and the next day.
Some
It's
days you're the
just the
windshield,
job.
some days you're the bug.
Right, but the way he says it
I
sounds.
just honestly hate computers. They make me so mad, but it's so satisfying when it fits together, you know, like,
Well, it's so
that's what
satisfying
always
to
did it
beat
for
the
me.
computer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've always got to remember,
It's satisfying
whenever
to beat the computer.
whenever you get stuck with a code problem, you've got to remember that it's your fault.
That's the thing. that
The
always gets
computer
me.
is doing
Right.
exactly what you told it to do.
It's like, why am I so dumb?
Yeah,
Like-
exactly. That's
Or it's Rails' fault.
Yeah, right, yeah, or
That's what I go
something
with.
up there. Right.
I mean,
blame the tools.
Yeah, my early days in Rails was like after the fact I would realize I was like trying to jam a square peg into a circular hole. And
Right.
I just didn't have the visibility to figure it out. So
Right.
it just took like me doing that 1,000 times before I'm like, oh wait, there's like a square corner. You know,
That was testing for me,
Yeah,
and
it's just
testable
like-
code. I had the same.
like it just felt like I was smashing my face on the keyboard, you know, for nights on end, and then I figured it out. Then you do it again, and again,
You just got to
and
keep
do it again.
It's persistence, it's the desire to learn, and the tenacity to keep doing it.
If I had to offer advice, it would be 2 things. One, like, take breaks, because like last night, or when I got to the end of my day yesterday, like, I was fighting this stupid bug. And then this morning, like, I took the night off. This morning I came in, I was like, oh, there's a line right there.
This happens to me all the time.
Yep.
Right, now I work in Pomodoros often, which is 25 minutes, 5-minute break. 25 minutes, 5-minute break. That work for everybody, works for me.
The other thing, the other advice I'd give is just to like find something you give a damn about other than programming, because that's a fault of mine, is that like my hobby is programming, and so like I finish the day, then I want to program, but like